In our previous videos, we talked about how to use mental flexibility to overcome the negativity bias and to adopt a growth mindset. We also need mental flexibility because it's really common to fall into a thinking trap, especially when we're tired or stressed. Thinking traps are errors in logic. They can be automatic, fixed patterns of thinking. They drain our energy and can lead to poor decision making. Let's talk about several types of thinking traps. Mind reading is one trap. Imagine you had a drop in sales. You ask John and your team if he's noticed anything that might be contributing to sales being down. John thinks, "Oh no, the boss thinks I'm useless." He's fallen into the mind reading trap, believing he knows what you're thinking. He makes up a story inside his head and thinks you're blaming him for the decline. He responds defensively and says, I don't know. He feels anxious, demotivated, and doesn't feel like coming to you with any of his ideas on what actually might be going on. You can see how mind reading plays out. It leads to miscommunication or blocked communication, negative emotions, and ultimately poor performance. John's not exactly going to be great dealing with customers when he's feeling this way. To challenge mind reading, we need to ask ourselves, what's the evidence for thinking this way? How do I know my boss is blaming me for the drop in sales? So that others don't have to read our mind, we need to make sure we're really clear in our communication so there's no room for confusion or second guessing. It seems so simple, but often when we're in a hurry, we assume everybody knows what's going on inside our heads. A second example of a thinking trap is the magnifying and minimizing trap. This can happen when we focus too much on the bad aspects of a situation and ignore the good aspects. For example, we might get customer reviews that make us question whether we should stick with a new product line. But if we counted the reviews, we might see that there are more positive than negative reviews. Another example of magnifying and minimizing is magnifying the financial losses in one area of our business. We might focus on them and feel like the business is failing. We might minimize the area where we are profitable, which means we miss opportunities to strengthen what we're doing well and build up that area. To avoid falling into the magnifying and minimizing trap, we need to weigh up all the evidence, take a broader look, and make ourselves notice the good and the bad equally. Another thinking trap is called catastrophizing. When you fall into this trap, you expect things to go really, really badly. For example, you think that not only will the meeting go badly, but the client will post a negative review about your business. The review will go viral. You will end up with no new customers. The client takes you to court. You spend all your money on legal fees. You exhaust your mortgage lending. You have to sell the house and move into a caravan park. Your partner leaves you and you end up alone and penniless. Now, of course, I've taken this example to the extreme, but that's exactly what you need to do when you find yourself catastrophizing. Imagine the worst case scenario. Write down all the possible horrific things, and then do the opposite. Force yourself to write down the most extreme best case scenario. Maybe the meeting goes really well. The client posts an incredibly positive review that goes viral. You end up with more customers than you can handle. A big player in the market buys your business, you give some of the profits to cancer research, the researchers make a breakthrough, and you end up on the cover of Time magazine. Again, you can hear this as extreme, but what's happened now is that you're feeling a bit more lighthearted. Now that you're in a positive frame of mind, your brain can think more accurately instead of focusing on the negative. The third step is to write down what is most likely to happen. The client is difficult, you struggle through the meeting and you don't fully agree on the next steps, but you make progress. The fourth step is to make a plan to deal with the probable situation. You go into the meeting with a list of compromises you're willing to make, a list of questions to ask, like getting the client to explain what's really important to them, and you plan that if things get heated, you'll suggest pausing and getting back together another day. And for any kind of thinking trap, make sure you're not jumping to conclusions. Learning to be more flexible in how we see a situation and learning to challenge our thinking helps us to be more adaptable, and that can save us precious time and energy. If you'd like to learn more about mental flexibility, do watch our other videos if you haven't already. The videos are Overcoming the Negativity Bias and Unlocking Potential with the Growth Mindset.